IKMC 2022. So today's session, from scientist to an entrepreneur, what holds you back? So this session is being chaired by Dr. Kalpana Sastry. She is MD Ag Hub Foundation at PJT South Agriculture University in Hyderabad, and it's also being co-chaired by Dr. Madhusudhana, CEO AIC-CCMB, as well as Professor Navakanta Bhat from IISc Bangalore. And in this session, the main reason of having this session today is like we all work in an ecosystem, and there we work with startups day in and day out, and we wanted to know what are the problems the startups face, be it the scientists who had become entrepreneur or be it the clinicians who had become entrepreneur. What are the problems, how they mitigated it, and is there anything we can do to help them to go to the next level? So in this session, what we'll do is, first, Manish will start the session. Manish and Harshada are the session coordinator along with me. I am Hema. And Manish will start the session by setting up the tone of the session with a brief presentation, after which the session floor would be handed over to the chairs and the co-chairs, and they will take the session forward. So just a brief introduction about our chairs and co-chair. So we have Kalpana ma'am. She is a distinguished agricultural scientist with a 3 decades of experience, and she also has experience in technology commercialization, intellectual property, and she's extensively working in the startup ecosystem. So Kalpana ma'am started her journey from ICAR. No? Okay, fine. Okay. So the next slide,
it, isn't it? So.
Next slide, please. So I will just give a very, very brief introduction then for everyone so that we have more time for discussion. So Madhu sir, I think most of us over here would be knowing him. So he is leading the AIC-CCMB incubator over here in Hyderabad. And previously he was working in CCMB as a scientist. The next one, please. So Professor Navakanta, not all of us might know him. He is from IISc Bangalore, and he is the Dean of the Division of Interdisciplinary Sciences over there, and also a professor at Center for Nanosciences. And he has several patents to his credit, and also he also is a co-founder for a startup called Bhat. We will know more about it during his talk. Okay, and then for these startups, I would request them to just briefly introduce them in one line so that like we don't waste much of our time. So we start with Vaibhav.
Startups or innovators?
Innovators, sorry. Yeah.
That's a good word. So I'm Vaibhav Bhatia. I'm CEO of Lamark Biotech, and we are building cold chain independent formulations of biopharmaceuticals like insulin, vaccines to enable their transport and logistics independent of cold chain, so they don't require refrigeration. The idea is to make sure we reach the deepest pockets of the globe, and these medicines should reach them. Thank you.
Very good morning to one and all. I'm Dr. Kranti, founder of Asia Healthcare Private Limited. I have a startup named Asia, which is working on localized drug delivery system for post-tooth extraction wound management. I'm a dentist turned entrepreneur, so I will be telling the stories towards how a doctor would be going through an entrepreneurial journey in the upcoming session. Thank you.
So just to update you, of the 7 innovators over here, 3 of them are clinicians turned entrepreneur and 4 of them are scientists turned entrepreneur.
Hi everyone, I'm Varsha Shridhar. I'm a biotechnologist by my basic training, and I have sort of evolved into a public health problem solver. So I really like creating transdisciplinary teams and working with them to solve public health relevant problems.
Hello, I'm Prem Nandini Sadgunam. I'm an optometrist. I'm a clinician scientist, so somewhere in the cusp of what Hema was saying. I work at LV Prasad Eye Institute, and we developed a device called pediatric perimeter, essentially to test the visual fields of babies. So in general, when we think of vision, we think of a chart What's the smallest letter you can see on the chart? But there is more to vision than just the smallest letter that you can identify. If you look straight ahead, how much of the sight vision that you can absorb into your consciousness is something that is called as visual field, and that's important for your orientation and mobility. We have a lot of devices for adults, but none for babies. So I think in the journey I'll be telling about this device. Thanks for the opportunity, and great thanks to Dr. Vishwanathan and Hema for pushing me to come to this, even though I thought I'm an outlier here.
Hi, I'm Fathima Benazir. I'm the Chief Science Officer of Azooka Labs. So at Azooka Labs, we are trying to solve a 46-year-old problem of biohazardous dyes being extensively used in molecular biology and molecular diagnostics. So we have two platforms. One is a safe fluorescent platform, food-grade safe fluorescent platform, where we have dyes for all building blocks of biology, and also a molecular transport medium platform which we developed during COVID-19. So now we have extended that to all types of sample collection, including cell-free DNA tubes. So our vision, we started with the vision of creating premium biotech products from India, and that is how Azooka was born in 2016. So I'll share more about my journey in due course. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Shomajit Roy. I'm a professor at Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Kolkata. And we, during the time of pandemic, so me with my wife and with our friends, we started a startup which is known as Solar Initiative Private Limited. Working very hard, we were able to create a small modular product, which is an oxygen maker. It is just, you press a button and then you get oxygen. So that's our product, and I'll be very happy to talk about it. And our business model is, we want to create innovation, sell the few pieces, proof of concept established, then do a tech transfer. And that's where we are very thankful to Harshata and IKP team for getting us here. And we look forward to future collaborations. And we want to make healthcare affordable. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. At the outset, thank you to IKPMC and IKP for giving me the opportunity. Myself is Dr. Vikash Kumar Agarwal, surgical oncologist with 22 years of experience. So in this journey, we face that cancer patients require chemotherapy and difficult to get a venous access for a IV therapy. So we have devised a sutureless chemoport which can be there implanted inside for lifelong. They can receive a painless treatment. So this is what a journey from a clinician to entrepreneur. We got a big Bharat grantee and we need your guidance to take it further. Already we are at TRL 6+7.
Thanks everyone. So now Manish will set the tone, and later it will be handed over to the chair and the co-chair, and we will first focus on the three main questions which we shared with you. Okay, Manish, please.
Thank you very much. Very warm good afternoon now. What I'll do is quickly set a tone for what we are talking about here. We have all the researchers and scientists and the entrepreneurship journey, what challenges we have faced. To start with, let us have a quick look on how innovation with scientists and researchers have evolved over time. It's kind of a map which says university research and applied research was earlier understood that the major role of a scientist is. Then it evolved into that you have to get connected to business, understand about business and industry to get into entrepreneurship role. But now it has become more complicated, and with more complications comes more roles and more challenges that we are facing, and that's why we have gathered today. Now we have to look into university research, being applied research. We have to see business, we have to see how social innovations are happening, how government policies affect them, and what is the environment of innovation that's around us. Just to get a brief outline, a proof of concept, you develop IP, you publish your research. After that, as entrepreneur, for your focused approach towards your technology, you form a company, startup. If it is from research institute, we call it spin out. After that, the phase of product development comes, and then you have to get validation and regulatory approvals in some cases. Then comes commercialization, and then you are thinking about scaling up, having an exit or IPO. What are the challenges that you have to face, we usually face, are the laws and policies at university level and government level. We have to operate our companies and we have to see what are the governance policies within the startup, how we are ensuring effective functioning of a startup from which, through which you are taking your innovation to market. We have to see the services, different kind of services, service providers, experts and mentors that help you along the way. It could be IP services, could be legal services, could be regulatory services. Investment is a huge part of this entrepreneurship journey as well. Regulatory service and finally industry partnership. These are few of the things we usually face, and we look forward to your inputs of what is specifically or what broad or narrow problems still exist and how do you think can be resolved. There are a lot of players who can help you, and that's listed in the top, but then how much they are effective, what they need to do still, and how from one end to another end successfully we can move. So with this, I now hand over to our chair and co-chair to start and moderate, take the session forward. These are the 3 questions that were posed. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manish, for setting the entire, platform for us to talk on. So before I really actually start with my comments, I thought we'll start off with both my co-chairs, and I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Bhat and Dr. Rao Garu, both scientists of very high caliber in their different sectors. So we are representing engineering. He comes from the molecular biology and with applications in healthcare. Of course, I come from agri. So I'll speak last because lunch is at the last, after this session. So we'll start off with Dr. Bhat. Maybe highlight on what takes us scientists who are trained as scientists to becoming, to take on and embark the entrepreneur, particularly with reference to IISc, because I think if you look at statistics, yours is the golden boy of in India, at least in terms of an institution. So,
thank you very much, Dr. Kalpana, and it's a pleasure to be here. Good to see some old faces. I was just talking to Ramji a while ago, and it has been a very enriching journey with IKP and BIRAC over the last several years. So it's an interesting theme for today's discussion, what holds you back to turn a scientist into an entrepreneur. I think I will present both, maybe to begin with the institutional perspective and then individual perspective. I think the key here is really perception, right? Because scientist generally is thought to be somebody who does research and creates knowledge. But research and knowledge is created at the end of the day to really impact society. And that is where product and utility comes. And historically, it has been thought in academia that, these are at different pedestals. Doing research and creating knowledge is, if you will, Brahminical, and doing products and, creating utility is, it's being done, and, it's afterthought. It's so easy that you don't even have to worry, right? And also, historically, this was not given importance in academic institutions, right? It was considered to be, not so important, and even so in reward system in academia, right? Whether it comes to your promotions or otherwise, that was never considered, right? The only thing that was considered was how many papers you have published and what is the impact factor, not how many things have you translated and created impact on society, right? But I'm glad to say that this has been changing over the years, in the last few years, in all top institutes in the country, IISc included, and many other IITs as well. And there, a lot of institutional structures have been created. Almost all these institutes now have incubation centers. IISc, we have something called Foundation for Science, Innovation and Development. Earlier it used to be called SID, now it's called FSID, which is a Section 8 company which has been created with the sole purpose of translation, right? And what it has done over the years is created structures both for young scientists, which is students and postdocs, if you will, and also more experienced or older scientists like faculty, avenues to convert their research know-how into products through entrepreneurship journey. For instance, for young scientists, students who have just graduated, it has created a program called Entrepreneur in Residence program, wherein the graduate may not be still sure whether they want to start this entrepreneurial journey. So they are given this soft landing, about a year or so, where they are given all the support, including their salaries and any other funding to create a POC. And then they can decide whether they want to then create a company, right? So that is a very good thing that has happened. And even for faculty, now there is a structure where they can either take a sabbatical leave. This is now there for many institutes. And even if they are not taking leave, even when they are in a regular position, they can take 1 day in a week off to work on the company, which is phenomenal if you think about it, right? They are on a government salary, but you can take 1 day in a week to work on a startup, right? So these are the structural changes that have come in. And in addition, there is access to all facilities that is provided. Seed funding is provided, space is provided. So the whole, mindset is changed, saying that this is equally important. Doing research is important, but doing startups is also equally important. So this really has become an enabler. I'm glad to say that over just last 4-5 years, we have more than 60 startups. These are all deep science and technology based startups. And many of them have graduated. We have Dr. Fathima here. She will talk more about her experience. But the point I'm trying to bring up here is that the ecosystem, which was mentioned by, I think, Dr. Hema or someone else, is extremely important if we really want to be future ready, as Dr. Mashelkar was talking about in his...
if we want to pole vault.
Pole vault, right. We really need a lot more such ecosystems in the country, and only then we can really pole vault and beat the best in the world, right? I mean, if you look at the university ecosystem, I mean, some of you may want to read this very nice article published by Stanford in 2020. Their Technology Office of Licensing completed 50 years. So they have brought out a very nice article, what has happened in 50 years. And you may be surprised if I tell you the licensing revenue that Stanford has generated is more than $2 billion US. This is a staggering amount. And many successful stories, but the top 5, this is very interesting for this crowd, which may come as a complete surprise. If you look at the top 5 revenue making inventions, 4 out of those top 5 are in biotech. And you might have thought that they're all in computer science. And only one of them among the top 5 is Google, which, all of us know, but other 4 are actually biotech based. So, that is the kind of ecosystem that we want to create going forward. Maybe I'll pause here and I'll come back.
Dr. Madhu.
Thank you, IKP, for inviting us to be here. I think this is a favorite topic of most of us. If you say scientist or innovator, to become an entrepreneur, what holds back? I think in today's ecosystem, I think the challenges are less, but the challenges are obvious, in the sense that, obviously, anybody, innovator or a scientist, has to work in a place where the work is supported by the host organization, whether it's a private university or the government institute. So obviously there are obligations to the host institute when you want to take it out to the next level. That's where the challenges come. And usually the problem here is the challenge to solve a problem of tech transfer normally is with the innovator, which is a big problem. Big problem is in the sense not that they're not smart, but it is something they're not skilled. It's not that they can't do it. So what happens is unless the ecosystem provides a kind of a hand-holding on that and typically take away the burden of translation from the innovator, it'll be great. There are guidelines, there are incentives, but somehow it doesn't translate at a ground level. Still, you'll have to find your own way. If you see a success here and there, it is primarily because of that innovator's perseverance and his passion behind it, not because of the system supported it as it happens in the West. So these are all we know these problems. We know what are the solutions. But in the end, you end up talking to an administrator about the negotiation who is not really competent to negotiate. Or somebody to help you in, if I go to a director and say, I have a great idea, then the next question that comes is, what's the value of it? And we don't have many people around to tell you the value of a technology that is new. Especially startup, it becomes much more because startups are new things, they come up with new innovations, there is no market value, it's not easy to put an economic number on it. So all this becomes a feedback for the decision the host institute makes when they are not very comfortable with the whole game, then the whole thing goes to the back burner. So these are all the things that happen, but what holds back is when it comes to IP. I always find one of the most challenging thing when we negotiate for IP, is it an exclusive or non-exclusive? No company would be interested in a non-exclusive thing to begin with because any lead that comes from an institute is kind of raw and somebody has to put in money to make it into a product. Why would they do it if it's not exclusive? So, but a government doesn't look at it as if, it's a kind of Gates Foundation kind of a thing, it should be useful to the rest of the world kind of stuff. It's not going to work. So somebody has to take hard calls on these matters. And unless, like Dr. Bhat was mentioning about the ecosystem has to be much more mature. It's not that it isn't there, but how do we source them? How do you bring it in? There are a lot of these, these kind of symposia, workshops keep going on for innovators. But the bottom line is it still has to happen more often, more seriously, more proactively. Don't leave it to the inventor. And obviously the inventors are very passionate, but that's where their contribution stops. Somebody else has to take it up and then take it forward. So I think the challenges are obvious, the guidelines are there, but somehow it still takes time to translate. Let's hear about others' opinion.
Thanks, Dr. Bhat and Dr. Rao, for setting the plan of action and what we have to talk. I deliberately asked them to talk first because I know the type of trajectory represented by Dr. Bhat has been very intense. Probably what Dr. Madhusudhana represents is also a mixture of successes and failures in the environment. But I come from an environment which probably has been, more of a social capital type of investment by the public sector. And today we are in we are at a juncture where we want to balance both, trying to make profit out of a system like ag food, and then also harmonize and bring out that balancing of social capital. Because at the end of the day, it's the word, our main stakeholder who is a farmer is a very touchy word in all dimensions. I don't agree on that because the second generation and the future farmers are much, much more entrepreneurial in their thinking than many of us sitting in this room. Why I deliberately was trying to say is I truly agree that the ecosystem has been maturing. I have been a watcher since I was so much happy to see Dr. Mashelkar because he was one of when I was younger, he was one of the towering figures who actually triggered me into this ecosystem of trying to be an enabler for innovation. And hardcore scientists like me, there's something always, and I'm telling you my own personal thing, something I believe that innovation is required, but maybe I'm not that risk-averse person to take a plunge into entrepreneur at that point of time of my career. So one important thing, all of us have to come, we grow up with science, and science is basically, tends to look at, we are focused and trained to look at the problem and trying to do it in our lab, in our setting. We need to, and to make it translational, there are some more elements which are required. Perhaps about 2 decades back, those elements were not ingrained into us as students, which was there even in the land grant and even places like Stanford, because personally I've seen how they actually, mushroomed over the years. That perhaps, I'm trying to say that you have episodes in Korea, you have episodes in the US, you also have in Germany, where a lot of innovation has come because scientists have contributed. The enabling system in UK is much more stronger than what we have here. Having said that, I have been in policy for writing this, particular from my sector. I was in the IP policy and tech transfer policy of ICR. Literally, from my pen, we wrote it. But still, I find there are blocks, there are challenges which Dr. Madhusudhana mentioned. And out of all the sectors, the lowest number of people who are faculty in established agriculture research organization, taking their plunge into entrepreneur are perhaps very low in numbers. And I'm saying it with very boldly today. I'm not trying to make that it is so rosy. But also remember the comfort level with which we all work in public sector organizations perhaps puts us. So when my young colleagues, when they start discussing their entrepreneurial journey, I request you, if in that first question, what motivated you, was there a compulsory motivation which pushed you into it, or it was by choice afterwards, because of passion? There are two elements. Some of you, I'm sure in your saying, and there's nothing wrong. You have, and you've taken it into that way. And then my request is, what was that factor which said, okay, this is the problem which you wanted to address? And then, of course, the challenges I know will be probably generic, everybody has. It is really nice that IISc is addressing on that sabbatical. So in 2007, in our policy document, we put a sabbatical with salary for 3 years. Till date, nobody has joined us for a spin-off. Either we don't have mature technologies, which I don't agree, but there must be some other factor which is not allowing us to pole vault again, I would say, into entrepreneur. And that's something we need to dissect after hearing all of you. So what is the order? I wasn't given. Hema? We just go like questions. You don't have to say exactly those questions. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, and it was great listening to all of you. You gave me the keywords now, so how I can say what I want to say.
That's our job. We are doing our job.
Okay, I want to give an example. First question is, how many of us have been to Akshardham in Gujarat? And there is this stone thing, where there's a guy, who is using a hammer and making himself. There is something. I hope all of you have seen that. And the question is, what is the problem of a scientist getting converted into an entrepreneur? Is the same problem. As a scientist, we are the makers. We create something. But as an entrepreneur, we have to break ourselves. So we ourselves are the biggest trouble, because we have cultured that mentality for 20 years or so sometimes, and the risk aversion, that goes away with your philosophies, the things that you have developed, the confidence you get in your child is the biggest trouble, because you have to go out, find people who do not know this, possibly something else. Okay, so that is the biggest challenge as a scientist you face. The question comes is, what motivated me? The motivation for me was, so when IKP was formed in 1999, I failed in my bachelor's. Okay, that was BSc Part 1. I failed. And I was like, I really wanted to do biology because in 95, my brother told me that there is something called genetic code. And if you know that genetic code, you can convert a human into a cockroach and a cockroach into a human. I was like, I would love to do that. That's what I wanted to do. So that was the purpose, not to make somebody to cockroach, but because I have heard the story of Buddha, and what hurt him was that why there is so much of suffering. So as a kid, I was always challenged by why people are aging, why there is disease. So that was the thing on the head always. And in 2000, when Cellular Genomics published the genetic code, I connected the dots as like, okay, I wanted to do that. Now there is genetic code, we know that. And from there, starting to getting into IISc in 2004, as a BSc Part 1 failure, getting into IISc, it was a big thing for me. And being a Punjabi, all family, being in a business and all. So from there, the motivation was always problem solving. And in IISc, I worked with night blindness. The idea was to see how retinol is transported to the eye. Then I went to postdoc, where I was working with breast cancer, why there is susceptibility to breast cancer, and then going next to macular degeneration, what leads to macular degeneration, why there are so many factors involved in it. It's not a monogenic disease. And after doing all that research for 12 years, 13 years, I was not able to get one solution to the original problem of how to reduce the suffering. So I was like, there is something missing. So that was the motivating factor. In 2016, I joined a spin-off after many failed attempts. I come from the school of Dr. Parmeshwar Iyer, in MBA department there in IISc. So he really, gave me that zing that, okay, how can a scientist do that? What are the components of a business and all those things? But that point I realized that there are a lot of components missing. So I have to break myself and try to figure out those components, not focus on what technologies I have developed. And I don't know how much time I have, but there was a very important quote.
Time is, you have to tell us, because
so halt me when I am speaking too long.
Yeah, we are all scientists and we need this content.
Yes.
So,
so there,
yeah, because this is something we all talked about, time management.
But in 2003, I visited IIT Delhi. And there, Dr. Chandra, who was heading biochemistry department, he said one thing. He said, what is the difference between a technology and science? And we were not able to answer him. He said, look, when you say science, you say statistically, significantly, and 95% chance it will work when you do this experiment. But technology has to always work. You can't say the brake of this car that you're driving at 100 will 95% chance work. So that 5%, chance from 95 to 100 is job of the innovator, as you mentioned. That's where you convert a science to a problem solution, and that fit you have to figure out. And I have to figure out how to increase time for me. That I'll do later. I give it to, I think, Kranti. Thank you.
But before that, quick on the challenges. You are now a successful entrepreneur. No entrepreneur says he's successful, I know.
As I said, again, in 2009, I heard Ravi Belur, who was the director, founder of...
The main challenge...
as a PhD student was, we don't have the financial backup as a professor or PhD.
The main challenge is always finance.
Is a finance, because you need to have some runway, something to back you up when you are taking those risks. Because you can't be risk averse when your family is suffering for food.
Yeah.
So that is always the case.
But having said that, we take it for granted that all of you have challenges for finance. If you have any other challenge which you have faced, please air that.
Sure. First of all, to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Kranti, professor and head at a dental college in Hyderabad. The innovation or entrepreneurship journey started way back in 2010 during IKP and AIC-CCMB mentorships which were done in our institute to tell about the importance of innovation. So that's when our innovation journey started. So as a professor, we used to teach first BDS and second BDS dental students, and then the journey was going as a plain journey where we did not have that kind of instinct to go into research and then go into these techno-commercial aspects as well. So when during these meetings, we never had an idea about what entrepreneurship is or what innovation is. So considering the importance of this innovation, like we ventured into multiple topics to find out what actually are the real problems what we face. So basically, because we fit into the field of dentistry, we have to obviously identify the problems associated with dentistry. So then we thought probably we'll venture into that and then see what idea suits us. So in dentistry, probably what we thought was extraction issues and the type of antimicrobial therapy or the drug abuse what happens during extraction procedures. So normally my innovation came through extraction. Like usually after extraction we kind of prescribe antibiotics for patients to prevent secondary infection which is created at the site of wound. So normally we have normal localized drug delivery systems to put in place, which are already existing in the market, but there is none which is used for post-tooth extraction, which is kept in the socket. We have gel foams and bone wax which are used for reducing the bleeding. So we thought, like, why not we kind of incorporate this similar kind of biomaterials into the socket to reduce the bleeding and reduce the amount of antibiotic which is actually incorporated at the site of wound. So that's where the real thing started, and then there was no looking back from that time, and then with the due courtesy from AIC-CCMB and IKP, we had a lot of support. And being a dentist, I mean, to handle all these issues like patent issues, techno-commercial, marketing, and then knowing about all the regulatory challenge was a difficult thing because we had no idea. In fact, to be precise, we even were not aware of handling the Excel sheets. So that was a difficult task. And to handle biological aspects and then experimental process was too much of a challenge. So that's why I think the team approach which Bayrak suggested was very useful for us. So like, not just being a doctor can handle everything. So we need support from a business point of view, mentoring point of view, and then the lab part of it. So that was the team approach which gave us more impact to go further ahead during our entrepreneurial journey. And then there are several other roadblocks, I think, which the mentors have suggested. I think we would definitely take those points to take the innovation forward. Thank you.
Hi. So I was in my teens, pre-teens, when cable TV first came to India. This was in the 90s. And my mom would not let me watch, Santa Barbara, Bold and the Beautiful, MTV, never. But she did let me watch two things. That was Star World, and there was a program called Gilligan's Island, and BBC, and there was a program called Rough Science over there. And Gilligan's Island, if you watch it now, you will cringe. It's the stupidest show in the world. But there is a scientist over there, and that scientist, to me, that was, I think, my first idea of what a scientist could be. This guy made like a parachute out of some rubber somewhere else. He did all sorts of amazing things. And I was like, gosh, I want to be like that guy. And in BBC, in Rough Science, there were actually real scientists who were put in an island somewhere. You can see it on YouTube, and it's amazing. And they would be given like different tasks. You have to make a camera, you have to find the age of the island, and these are like actual scientific problems, and these guys did not have any of the instruments that we typically expect people to have, and they would have to make it. And I was like, this is what a scientist should be. And to me, a scientist really, because of this awful show called Gilligan's Island and because of Rough Science, was somebody who could solve amazing problems. So I did a PhD and a postdoc thinking that's what I would learn to do. And I mean, I am a little biased against academic research, I'm really sorry, but that was not what I learned. I learned a lot of research, and I was very burnt out by the end of it because that idea of a scientist was not what I was actually doing in lab. So I left academia because of a lack of purpose. I was like, what am I doing in my life? And anything that I can do, somebody else with some similar kind of training can do. What am I doing which is particularly novel? So I had lack of purpose, and I was burnt out. And that was actually the reason I left academia. I thought I would learn to become a counselor because I really wanted to talk to humans after a decade of talking to mice and cells. And in the US, like I would go for like weeks without talking to a single human being. My greatest conversations would be with my bus driver saying, hi, how are you, kind of a thing. So I was really terribly unhappy. So I actually got trained as a counselor, and my entrepreneurial journey happened mainly because I thought there was these health inequities that I was seeing as a counselor. And my husband happens to be an HIV doctor, so I thought, okay, let me start providing HIV tests at a much lower rate than it is right now. And my main interest at that time was drug resistance. And these tests are really expensive, and I thought, okay, fine. I'm sure I can work it out so that it's cheaper. That was my entry into entrepreneurship. So it was mostly, I would not say it was a passion at that time. Now it is. And it was definitely not because of something that was like driving me to do it, but it was really a thing of what else can I do that is not academic science. So it was more of a what do I not want to do. I think the greatest challenges in some ways has been perception, as Dr. Navakanta mentioned. Scholarship is considered way more than business. And I come from a very traditional family. And for the longest time, I was very apologetic to my family. I'm like, yes, I know, I have a PhD. And they all come from, scholars, lawyers, doctors, whatever. I have to stop myself from apologizing, saying, I'm really sorry, but I have a startup. And I'm really glad that my grandmother did not know that startup was another word for business. If I had said business, she would have been like, what are you doing? I said, no, startup. Okay, I don't know what that means, but sure. So for me, myself, getting over that I am now no longer an academic researcher and I'm actually going to be doing something that is where I'm going to be earning for my own money in a much more transactional kind of a way was a huge mindset shift. Other key learnings for me was actually just having faith. My husband and I both got into entrepreneurship at the same time, so there were many times when there was no money coming into the family for a longest period of time. It was like, how do we pay school fees this month? Kind of a thing. What I've truly, I think, realized is that having faith in yourself is the greatest thing, because fear is what stops you. And when you say, you know what, I'm just gonna stick it out. I'm going to be patient. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to have faith in myself and the universe. Think something's going to work out, and invariably something does. I don't know how it is, but it's true. And I think that other largest learning for me is we don't have to do everything by ourselves. Yeah, we're a business, but my business is really one part in a much larger ecosystem. So how do I fit myself into that ecosystem? How do I find those ecosystems? And I think in the past couple of years, especially after COVID, this sort of creating or becoming part of larger ecosystems and larger transdisciplinary networks has been my greatest learning. Thank you.
All right. So the first thing is when Hema asked me to be on this panel and she said, and the question.
Hema, keep telling us about the time because I don't have a voice.
He's doing it. I see the white card and I stop.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing is, when I was asked to join this panel, I actually quickly Googled and saw what does entrepreneur actually means. Okay, and it says that it's a person who sets up business or businesses, takes a financial risk in the hope of making a profit. And I don't really tick on any of that. I've not set up businesses, not taken financial risk, and I'm not looking for gains in monetary sense, right? So I'm an optometrist. I don't know how many of you know who an optometrist is. Okay, an ophthalmologist. So people think, right? Everyone wears specs, right? But you think that if you go to an eye hospital, you see an ophthalmologist. If you go to an optical shop, then you think it's an optician. But somewhere in between, there is an optometrist, right? So an ophthalmologist is someone who treats eye as a physiological, biological structure. They medicate, they do surgery. An optometrist is someone who applies concepts of math and physics, because your eye is also a focusing unit, a camera, okay? I always say this because many times people confuse me for an eye doctor because I have a doctor, but that's just from my PhD. Okay, so I'm an optometrist, and I did this in Shankar Nethralaya in Chennai, and I actually saw many patients, and some of them, the textbooks would say something and you would see exactly the opposite thing. So first thing you realize is everything on black and white on the book is not necessarily true. So this pushed me for research, which I did. And I went to Ohio State University, and then I realized, okay, there is so much we need to understand. And unlike Varsha, I am very academic research person, okay? And when I was doing my postdoctoral training in Harvard Medical School, we came across a patient who actually had a squint, okay, like his eye was turned out. He went for a cosmetic surgery because just to make his eyes straight. And it was at that time they found out that he actually had a field loss. So half of his field is not seen. So it turns out that your eye can turn out probably as an adaptive mechanism because you're not seeing on that side. So the eye sort of turns into the blind field. The problem is in many children, parents bring them for cosmetic correction and we don't have any device that actually measures this visual field. So people would just do this cosmetic surgery, right? So I realized doing that research work, hey, this is something that we need to address, right? And when you look around, there are no devices and all of this. So I had already decided that I'll be coming back to US even before I went to US because I know the problem over here is much more. Every fourth person who is blind on this planet turns out to be an Indian, so why would I be in the US when all the problem is here? So when I came back here, LV Prasad Eye Institute is one fantastic institute which I really owe a lot. I think I'm sitting here because of them. And so they did this hackathon workshop with engineers and clinicians, and they said that what is the problem that the clinicians want to solve, and then the engineers could fix it. So in this process, I was telling them about this idea, and that's how we built the device. Now, when we did this, and then of course I was doing academic research, publishing and all that, and I talk present in conferences, I realized everybody wants this device, but nobody is willing to take that risk, make the device and do all of that, right? And so that actually what motivated me into the path. So I still think to myself if I'm an entrepreneur, but because I have the support system of LVPI, and ma'am, like what you said, finance is not an issue for me. And I suppose I'll come back to the third question, at which time I'll tell you what the issue is. I'm done.
I don't know whether you get a chance again, so the tell your
questions
challenge also.
Aren't we answering only the first question or all the three? Oh, okay. So, well, the challenge for me is whatever that we have developed as a device is very new. Presently nobody uses. So they don't know what the application is, right? It works, we present in conferences. I got the BioAsia award. Dr. Madhu, I think you were one of the judges there and all of that. Everybody likes it. People come to me and say, oh, when the device is ready, tell us, we'll market it, okay? But when we try to work with companies to sort of license and take it, they ask for, oh, what's the user case? How many products will be self? So they tell me it's a virgin territory, so nobody actually wants to take the risk. So the big medical device companies are willing to buy you out only when you take the risk, prove the case, show the market. So I'm just in the process of making the user case, and I'm doing that only by research, publications and conferences. So we are working with companies, but then the finance is an issue, but it's more of nobody is taking that ownership because they don't know how the product exactly would work because it's very new and people have been carrying on with clinical care even without the disease. So that's the challenge for me.
Good, thanks.
I think for me, I would say that, to be very honest, the reason being I was a gold medalist, and despite being that, I couldn't get any good academic positions where my teaching could be assisted with research. So I used to teach in private colleges, and it really got me saturated after a point of time because intellectually I was not making any progress or improvement. So it was then that I looked for postdoc positions at IISc in Professor MR and Murthy's lab. I should really thank him because I want to address one point here. Mentors really make or break, be it for in the academic segment or entrepreneurship, because for Azooka, mentors have played a very critical role. So I was a Dr. Kothari postdoctoral fellowship. I got it there, and Murthy told me, you have 2 kids and still you have the passion to do research, and I will let you work in my lab for that reason. And I think in the 3rd year of my postdoctoral research, I met my co-founder, who's also my schoolmate and friend from class 1 to 10. So he just asked me, I was looking for postdoc positions, and I passed my resume to him. He said, you have quite an impressive resume, and why are you looking to go out? And I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm not getting any good good positions here. Then he said, what do you do? What is it that you do? I see that you have so love being in the lab. What is it that you do? So eventually we got into a conversation where I said that publications and citations are the end of whatever I'm doing. So he asked me a question, rightly pointed out by Professor Navakanta, that perception, right? That question really changed my perception. He said, are you trying to tell me you're burying all your lifetime's effort in books that not many people read and understand? A common man cannot understand what you read, and that really got me thinking, and that's how the journey of Azooka began. And he said, I'll help you with business, and you can take care of science and do what you love to do, and that's how we started with Azooka. And we could come this far. Primarily, yes, one big learning and one tip that I want to give to every scientist and entrepreneur is it is essential to have a team member who complements your skills, especially in business, because that was the biggest challenge for me. I could not understand any business conversation. It'll go off my head and I will just sit like this. So he keeps scolding me, remove your hand from there. It shows that you're not confident. Because I didn't get the confidence. Being a scientist, you are not able to be confident in something you don't understand everything. And that unlearning was the biggest challenge. I think that unlearning and relearning is very essential for every scientist and entrepreneur, because scientists have a big ego and we have a different kind of a mindset, and whereas business, humbles you down to the core, and I think that mindset change and perception change is very essential. And I think I'd like to address the second question where mentors have played a critical role. Yes, Murthy allowed me to work on this while I was a postdoctoral fellow, and when my fellowship was out, I was a single mother with 2 kids. I didn't know where to go. I just went to visit Professor Savitri. She said, I'll give you a fellowship, continue your work. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't support you. No woman takes this kind of a challenge, and I think our products have been developed under her guidance, and we've come this far primarily because of their support. But coming to the challenges, yes, as rightly pointed out, the ecosystem is ripe now. But I'd still like to point out that from seed to sapling, the ecosystem is very ripe, but from sapling to tree, right, scaling up, I think we still have a lot of challenges in terms of support, being in licensing and tech transfer. As he said, we don't find a lot of mentors or consultants who have done good technology transfers from India in the biotech space. I think that's a gap that we definitely need to address. We had some mentoring sessions with some experts in the US. The language that they speak and the technology transfer language that we speak here is totally different. They are putting so many angles to a single licensed doc, which we are unaware of. And I think that has to be addressed. That is one thing. And funding, I would still like to reiterate, funding is a challenge for seed to prototype. That's idea to prototype. There's no dearth in funding. Azooka has won 3.5 crores grants. Okay, we've done all this. We've taken our idea to products with grants. But however, scaling, I think, requires a different kind of funding and a speed. And the VC investor funding ecosystem is still nascent for biotech. And I think that's a big challenge. And I would like to add on only one more challenge that we face. Mentoring in terms of financials and balance sheets is very important for scientists and entrepreneurs, because unless you understand P&L, you cannot run a business. And I think that's also somewhere we really need help. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
I would like to add that I think those kind of things like balance sheet and P&L should be taught in school. We don't have to wait until they're in our 30s to start learning about.
No, now that you brought that point, I think hiring is also a big challenge when you're scaling up, because all the good students go abroad, and what we get here, our hiring ratio is 80 interviews to 1. That's the kind of skill development that is there in. Yeah, this is a real problem, and that's why we are trying to build our own community, do internships, and bridge that gap. And I think that gap has to be addressed in academic institutions itself. Yeah, thank you.
Seed to Sapling, there is a book which has come out very recently, and just 10 days back I did a book review also. I think I'll send to her, you just send the link so that you read. Okay, the title is Seed to Sapling. In our review, I said from tree, I'm looking for another book from sapling to tree. Exactly, that's in the review.
I think we need that if we have to be like Stanford in the biotech space. Otherwise, this space is quite challenging.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so good afternoon. First, I will be talking about motivation, so what motivated me. So I'll just start with a little bit of my trajectory. So I was born and brought up in Calcutta. I studied in St. Xavier's College, and then I moved to IIT Delhi to do my master's. Then I went to Germany to do my PhD. It was totally academic journey. Then I started working as a postdoc in the Netherlands. That was a drift from pure science for science sake to science for application sake, a little bit, because I started working with theoretical physicists, and I was the black sheep, so to speak, because the language was different. But then the ultimate aim was when we were working in Utrecht, I met a guy from Shell, and he said, Shomo, you know, what do you love? And I do love to see my name printed on the paper, and preferably with a star. So that's the drive, you know, I have. And then he was saying, yeah, you know, but if you go to a supermarket and if you see a product which your son or your daughter picks up, that's a different kind of a kick. Think about it. He disappeared from my life and gave me a nightmare that what is it that I'm doing? Then we started developing some nascent things, you know, like looking up some product and things like that. And we developed some dispersions. I moved to do BASF, the chemical company. I got a job there, and I was involved with tech transfer. That was fascinating. And I was working with a joint lab of Jean-Marie Len, who is a Nobel laureate with BASF, and had the privilege of talking to him. And he said, Mishomo, you know, one tech transfer, if you can do that, that's worth, from satisfaction point of view, maybe a couple of Nobel Prizes. So that was it. Then again, I got drifted. Home calling came. My parents, I come from a family of, as Varsha was mentioning, doctors and lawyers. And I came back, and my parents said, yeah, you should come back. And I'm extremely thankful to Professor C.N.R. Rao, who is one of my mentors. And I got into IISc Kolkata at a very rudimentary phase, and I was in my dreams. By the way, in between, something accidental happened. I got to meet my wife when I was doing my PhD in Germany. She comes from a business family. But her family thinks it's worth to be married to someone who pursues knowledge, you know, knowledge for knowledge's sake, not money. So that was it. She was pursuing for knowledge, and I was pursuing application. That complementarity was latent. We got married, funny story, and then we relocated. We were dividing time between India and China. Now, it so happens, I'm fast forwarding it, that latent thing, you know, that kick to see a product, that is deep inside. But then, as Professor Bhat was saying, as a young assistant professor, you can forget about it. Because you have to publish papers, you have to get promoted to your associate, then you become professor, you have the calls for the Swarna Jayanti, Bhatnagar and all these lures, you have the lures for Netcom, Angavante, PRL and all. So then you forget about all your, it goes out of your window. I had the gift of having two excellent and brightest students of my career at IIScr. They came up with two papers, fantastic papers, carbon dioxide conversion into ethanol, carbon dioxide conversion in acetic acid, at the same time splitting water into oxygen. And that was like, wow. We had Nature Communication, Angavante, it was all over. Then it so happened they are from a family I can recollect and I can connect with. They are from purely academic families. I pushed them, nudged them. They were shortlisted for IGYTI, very bright kids. And then, finally, they refused to be in the final round. And there is a person sitting behind me, Professor Prashant Panigrahi, and my wife. He's one of our co-founders. I was devastated. I went with my wife and with Professor Panigrahi into a cafe where I go to unwind when I have shocks of this nature. and my wife was there. And we were talking, oh, so I am done. Sorry, so, okay, so that's, can I have a couple of minutes, please, Hema?
You did found a company.
Yeah, but then the point is, for example, we had a rudimentary company, and as it so happens, we wanted to make a car, even thought of a name, named Pamera, which will convert carbon dioxide into fuel, run with a fuel cell, give oxygen. That was fancy as it could get. We forgot about the company until COVID struck, and we realized it's a disgrace that our countrymen, they are dying because they don't have access to oxygen. And we have the research that is done and dusting in the drawers. And it was that time with my wife, set of my friends, going against the family because they think business is bad. Business is only when you want to make money and you are a professor earning money, you should do charity. So that was going against it with my wife. We productized it, then we got the Prime Minister's Award and all these things. So then the innovation was taken into front foot, and I'm extremely thankful. People say nothing happens in Bengal. It's not correct. We had extreme support from Webel BCCI Incubator, and we now have this connect with IKP. So we are extremely thankful for Dr. Hema, Harshata, and Bandhana, and challenges are, I think, in the mindset. So that's what we see, and it's all everywhere. So it's in the investor mindset, it's in our own mindset. So we see the world as we perceive it. Thank you, and I'm sorry for having exceeded my time.
No, but excited to hear. So last, you are the last.
Yes. Last but not the least, madam, with these words, I think the motivation started when I was 5 years old, staying in a jute mill in Bengal, where all the jute mills have sat now, more than hundreds, and now it's not in 2 or 3. Not going into that, seeing a ESI doctor going from one home to other, playing in the ground, saying to my friend, I want to become a doctor, but not like this, who moves from one home to other home. Nobody in the family is a doctor, not knowing how to become a doctor. By God's grace, and with the time, graduated as a doctor also, became a surgical tutor in an Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research. The motivation or the bug inside to make a difference was still lying. Enjoying salary, private practice with a kid and a wife, not satisfied, want to make a difference, left them in the place, left the salary, left the job, moved to Mumbai, trained myself under Padma Shri Professor Rajendra Badve as a cancer surgeon. After that, when I'm planning to come back to Calcutta, he says that stay back because become a consultant. Just to make a difference, told him straightway, sir, I can't say no to you, but there are hundreds of patients lying on the footpath outside Tata Memorial Center, and most of them are from Bengal. If I go back, I can heal some of them. He patted my back because go back. Came back, started serving in cancer prevention and other things. Being a surgeon, solving the problem of cancer surgery, it's mostly painless because of the biotech, madam said, as biotech is developing painkillers, but saw the suffering of the patient receiving chemotherapy. Surgery in one-time event, chemotherapy is a long event. And once the chemotherapy drug extravasate from the vein, the patient has more suffering of the pain than the cancer itself. So there is a device already existing, chemoport device, hugely expensive. In our country where people are hardly striving to get their treatment done, having a 40,000 device put for getting a chemotherapy is something unthinkable. So thought of a new device which will make a difference in fixation, can be put by a doctor with a minimal training, a sutureless chemoport. With the help of IKP and my friend Dr. Vishal Rao, got that again motivation of doing something We started the journey 4.5 years back and reached a stage where a product is also ready, and we wanted it to make it so affordable that every pocket can afford it, such a small device. But now the major challenge is getting these product of international quality, and now getting this a biocompatibility testing is just IKP, and we are working together, bargaining like aloo and pyaj. From 25 lakh will be a biocompatibility testing cost, after which I have to go for a CDSO and a CE certificate. How can we make this affordable? This is a major challenge we are facing. We have reduced it to 12 lakh. I just had a word with our doctor friend. He said that AICC is something who can help you in biocompatibility. So on the floor itself, I'll ask Madhukar Rao sir. So if we get these connect, I think IKPMC and IKP is doing wonder in mentorship, helping us to reach here up to the proof of concept, and the next journey if we can reach, I think we can reduce the pain of the patients. With this, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to just add one more experience of ours with IKP. So we got sued by a vendor because we couldn't do payment on time. And we got the big grant, and it took some 6 months to 8 months for the grant to get disbursed. At that time, I think the grant was not yet disbursed, but IKP made a special case and released that money for us to save us from that kind of a problem. So I think incubator support and the kind of incubators we associate with also matters a lot, and that's a kind of support that
I
IKP
think that is across all the 7. It has emerged as the major factor.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's why I wanted to quote a specific example, but there have been several instances where they've gone beyond their way to help us and support us, and I really thank you for that support.
So thanks. I think it was great to hear the stories. Each, it's in own way a new revelation of something which is in their minds, and it was really nice to hear. I think both of us, both my colleagues also would agree that it was scintillating to hear. So how much time do we have, Hema?
20 minutes for discussion.
20 minutes. We have an audience. Is it fair, sir? We'll ask. Anybody a quick question? We'll do 20 minutes. Let's divide the 20 minutes. 5 each for my colleagues. I'll take only 3 at the end, but remaining 10 minutes. So 10 minutes, 1 question, or 4 questions or 5 questions? I think we should be.
Any questions on this side?
We've heard so much. I am full of questions, but I am restricting myself. Anybody has questions?
Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Manish.
Hi, this is Puran. I'm from IIT Mandi. I had one question, scientist to an entrepreneur. The gentleman here said, Mr. Roy, on a salary and then on a business, right? From a fixed salary, fixed cash flow coming in to a scenario where you do not know when you get the next check in the account. How do you financially sustain? Can you comment on that challenge for a scientist when they become an entrepreneur?
I think also to supplement your question, are you still a professor or are you only an entrepreneur? So you're taking the advantage of the policy.
Yes, and I'll also, okay, thank you for this question. So basically there are 2 things. So basically there are 2 things, right? So one thing is, of course, taking the plunge. We didn't have any investor. We didn't ask for investor. And this relates to my first job interview when I worked with BASF. They asked me the question, if you believe in your innovation, are you going to put your own money in there? If it's yes, then do join. If it's no, the door is open. So that was the intrinsic thing that I had. So we put in our own money. So basically we didn't have investor. Now this has benefits in the long run. Because now, for example, as IKP is helping us with the tech transfer, we don't have the investors pulling strings. And it's also not good, for example, that's what we learned from our mentors, because we are learning every time. They said, like finance has a different view and science has a different view. So it's not good for finance to dictate science, nor it's good for science to dictate finance. So that decoupling is very important, and I'm really lucky, as Madam said, that we are continuing. And it's, like sometimes no policy is a good policy. So it so happened that when we were starting out with IIScR, so we informed the board and everyone, they said noted. So that was it, and it is still noted, and we are going on with it. And then when we got the award and all this Prime Minister's award and all, so then, things started coming in. But still, I have this uncertainty. There are issues with paychecks, believe me, even if we have paychecks, there are moments when I end up with very little money in my account. So that is there, but I think that is good, because that uncertainty, that hunger, that foolishness, that drives me, which is a different kind of a satisfaction, I would say, that you keep on working and creating revenue. So you have to work, because if you are not working, then the light might burn out, even if you have a fantastic idea. End of the day, it's not the awards that matter, it's the market that awards you. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, there are other people who could comment on,
Please,
who didn't have a salary to sort of back them up. How did they survive?
Yeah, I'd like to take that question. So primarily because we've been months together without salaries and having challenges paying our kids' fee and stuff. But I think, it depends primarily on your calling. For Dr. Roy, right, his objective is to build the technology and do a technology transfer, whereas for some entrepreneurs, it's a calling that you want to build to last and you want to run that show. Primarily, it depends on that calling. But if you're looking at entrepreneurship as another means to an end, then entrepreneurship is not for you. It's not an easy way to make money. You will have to go through these challenges. And of course, yes, I think for Azooka, we've been lucky, as I said, mentors, incubators, family at times, although in the beginning stages, the family itself was a challenge because they don't want you to get into this and there's a lot of pressure. So some friends and well-wishers have already always supported us. I think what we believe is when you really are doing something to solve a real problem, and when you are for the cause, then money actually follows you, but you must have to have that patience and perseverance to go through all these challenges. But entrepreneurship is not something with which you can make a quick buck. So I think that's primarily depends on what your calling is.
I think she said it. Entrepreneurs is not you can make a quick buck. Yes. And that's thing which many of the youngsters need to learn today. We have sitting, I think Hema will agree, so many incubators who come, who think this is the fast way to make money. No. Any other person has a question? Just a minute, we'll give any other person from the audience who are motivated to become entrepreneurs. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is to Fathima, that she has very rightly mentioned about that there is an ecosystem from seed to sapling, but from sapling to, as a tree.
Fully agreed.
There are a lot of things missing. So if you have to list out a few, say a list, so what is the top priority, one or two, that is expected from the ecosystem?
Okay, I think for us right now, scaling up, during scaling up we have some challenges, of which, yes, of course, funding is a greater challenge because the scale of money that we require to scale up within a span of time is quite high, and grants in tranches actually don't help. They actually put you behind your growth path. That is one. The second is in terms of regulatory and approvals, as somebody rightly said. That's also another challenge that we face while we are scaling up. So CDSCO approvals, ISO, and all these. Say for example, I can quote you a very specific example. We got a Nidhi COVID grant. For regulatory, they gave us 5 lakhs, okay. First thing is the grant amount was less. Eventually, we tried to get the approval, and during the approval, we had to do a lot of other things like renovation because they wanted separate rooms for separate things. They wanted air purification system. They had 100 other mandates. for which we had to spend money, which they said they will not accept when we submitted in the UC. They said only the certification amount can be accepted. So these are some ground challenges that we actually face. And I think when, even when there are such grants and support systems, you can't have a very defined and rigid policy, because for every entrepreneur and for every type of business, the challenges are different, and this policy has to keep continuously evolving. And I think if we have that kind of an evolving policy and not very rigid for all entrepreneurs in this space, and can be looked at a case-by-case basis, I think that really will help.
Yeah, that's probably where the incubator leadership has a bigger role to play at the higher level.
So these are some challenges that I think I'm sure Vaibhav will face
Varsha, you
different.
raised your hand. 1 minute, somebody behind you. Yes, let's be fair. Again, I'm holding you, sorry.
No, I think it was a very minor point.
Thank you. So, hi. On to something what ma'am said. Most of us are developing something which is very unique, right? And there are some challenges in awareness. So, I was thinking this was basically for the question of market awareness. And if you had infinite funds, for say, you could have a lot of ads or something to get that done, the products that you were developing. But with limited funds, how can we address market awareness for unique products that you actually need market awareness and not competing with other American products?
Yeah, but it's also important that when you people start looking at problems, and this is something we continuously advocate in our sector, many entrepreneurs, okay, you identify your problem very well, but the market analysis is some factor which is quite often missed when you even come for the grant proposals and pitches. The market awareness, is there a market or not, is something quite often in our journey we tend to miss. Having said that,
It depends on whether, is yours a B2C, B2B or a B2G product? That would be the main thing.
Yeah, but we don't know at the time of starting our journey.
No,
even
that's
that.
true. But then I think that's where, if you go ahead and talk to people, like many of the IIMs have fantastic programs to help you figure this out. And they're all free. So if you're in Bangalore or, Udaipur or wherever the IIMs are, I would strongly
They're not
say
completely free, ma'am.
No. Many of them are. I would actually have to this thing. I've been through many IIMB programs, all of them are free.
Women sponsored, yes.
May I add to what the guy he has asked? If you look at recent examples, for COVID, Moderna, where they were already making a vaccine, mRNA vaccine, and suddenly a market, fit happened for them. Or if you look at the same thing for the two scientists, from AstraZeneca, it always looks like, that the market drivers and you found the market fit, but it's always a two-hand clap. You have to be positioned yourself in a way that you expect high probabilities that market fit would happen. You have to plan that, true. But still you have to wait for a market driver that the wind flows in. So you have to sail yourself in a way that you have the highest chance to go in some way, but also hope that wind will flow that side. In fact, Bio Entrepreneur was in Nature's one of the early magazines, and there this guy I read in 2006, he said, I started a HIV vaccine company, and that was the 46th HIV vaccine company. Okay, so why I started that? To position myself. So maybe an HIV vaccine I will not succeed, but there would some other vaccine or something would come up and I would succeed because I will have trained my team, I would have made everything, the system would be there, and then I will flow there. So you have to position yourself and be ready to pivot when the market opportunity comes.
So, how are we on time? We have 5 more minutes. So, is it fair, both the chairs? Sir?
Want me to go ahead?
Yeah, the last word.
I think we covered more or less the challenges. But what I see among the 7 companies, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Are you going to be one-trick ponies or something bigger? How do you pivot yourself? Do you want to become an entrepreneur in a sense of multiple products? Because one of the big challenges, if you have one product in your portfolio, you're not going to survive too long. So how do you pivot yourself in terms of including other, expanding yourself, things like that. So that's a big deal. Otherwise, you might sell your company and do something else. You may do something else interesting, but what I'm trying to say is, if you want to be in the entrepreneurial journey for a decade or two, you have to do it. And the typical challenge that comes is success comes slow. You tend to dilute your objectives and become, how do you survive? Revenue becomes an issue. So it's a challenge everybody faces, but I think you'll have to find your own personal solution that works for you. So, that's something that I always thought. And another thing about scientists are obviously very stubborn. I mean, if I can use the word, almost big-headed.
A little high self-ego.
So the flexibility, and they think that science is extremely important. Actually, it is not. It's only, in my opinion, I heard it from so many people, the science is only 10 to 15% of the product. That no scientist would like to accept it. But that's a reality. So unless a scientist who appreciates that, he's not going to become a good entrepreneur. So in my opinion, one has to unlearn a lot of, these notions to become a good entrepreneur. So I thought that is something very important. And I think these days, the government itself is trying to make technology development as glamorous as science. I think it's high time that we adopt that and then become more, whatever we do should be impact, should need not be social impact, it has to have some impact, whether it is environment or whatever. So I think the times are changing, but we want them to happen faster, so that, the typical thing I use is, India may be among the top 5 contributors in intellectual, publications and things like that, but in terms of innovation index, we are beyond 50, which is something very sad. That means we have a brain power but not translatable power. So these are the things, and I think most of us know the challenges, and I think the government is also coming good. And in terms of small ticket sizes, we are getting a lot of opportunities. 25, 50 lakhs is not a big deal. I think that's a nice ticket size also for taking a lead to a product and then make it sufficiently attractive to investor to put the next big money. So these are all the things I have. I think the times are good, and all of us know the challenges. I think we should pivot yourself to the winds. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Bhat?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Now we have heard some amazing stories of entrepreneurs. It's so nice to hear this. Again, I want to reiterate that, because of the IT startups, we keep hearing about a company becoming unicorn in a couple of years. Don't start your biotech journey to become a unicorn, right? Biotech companies have a very long gestation time, and you got to enjoy the journey, and not really worrying about the destination. And believe me, as some of the entrepreneurs have already said, fortune favors the brave. Right. Some solutions will come out even in the toughest times that you go through in this entrepreneurship journey. But yeah, you always have to be on your toes, especially, some of the young people who are budding entrepreneurs who want to become entrepreneurs. Andy Grove, who was CEO of Intel, has written a book called Paranoid Survive. Even big companies are so paranoid, right? And it's more so with startups. You have to be paranoid, you have to be on your toes, and every day is going to bring a lot of surprises to you, right? I think we have to go with the surprises and learn through that journey. That's also very, very important. And we're still in the month of October. I may also want to mention the famous statement of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, if you want to see the change, you be the change, right? Yes, ecosystem is evolving, it will continue to evolve, but I think we have to change the ecosystem, right, as a community. That is also equally important. What do I mean by that? I'll give some examples, right? For example, I keep telling this to my colleagues and a lot of students. I say every paper that your student writes can be a patent. It's just that you're not taking effort to file a patent. And also there's a perception that, if you file a patent, you can't publish and your graduation gets delayed. There are all these misconceptions. I think we need to start correcting that, right? We have to do that. And actually, not recently, for last 5 years, we have been doing this course on entrepreneurship at IISc, right? So trying to sort of sensitize the students and, really create this kind of an ecosystem. I think if we keep doing this as a community, we will have much, much brighter future going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. I know two of you had raised your hands, but since the time is always the essence, we will talk over lunch also and continue. Thanks a lot first for the organizers, and on behalf of both my co-chairs, it's been a great session. Thanks, IKP. So this word IKP has been lingering right from the beginning of this session. I found all of you, of course, it's heartening to listen about the support from AIC-CCMB also, as well as LV Prasad. So it only brings to one important factor, that perhaps an enabling ecosystem, which we keep on saying, in terms of an actual institution like an incubator, is a very important factor in the journey from being a scientist to actualizing into an entrepreneur. I think that's critical. All incubators are doing, and at this point of time in the country, the numbers are quite a lot. How many are impactful or effective or helpful is what the voice, the voice had come from the entrepreneurs are there. That is also one factor we need to put in. More the number, how are they performing to see the needs of the incubators or prospective entrepreneurs is very, very important. So the quality of an incubator emerges, as I think in this session, as a very major driver for taking some scientists into entrepreneurship journey. Equally important is in the ecosystem, the scientific institutions which are supporting. It's heartening to hear from Dr. Roy that his institute has said, okay, noted, and go ahead. He didn't, it's a new thing to hear in the government of India, that it's only noted and you go ahead. Great, but I would say in the long run, sir, as success comes, be vigilant and take the needful on this thing also. This comes from a lot of experience we all have, okay? But important to learn from IISc that the type of enabling environment institutions are doing. So the second element is already the science-based institutions across the country have to start gearing up to bring that new age translational thinking type mode into the young minds. Because something which came out in all of you were inspired by a TV show. These are episodes which need to be taken seriously by policymakers or research administrators and actualize them. Things are doing that. And I think most important, as we are coming, I would say, into the journey of entrepreneurship in India, we are now coming into the next decade. See, all the time you have been talking about grants and ideas and getting ideas, giving them grants to build. So most entrepreneurs are reached one scale and they want to scale up. And that voice for scaling up, especially in biotech, and I would say, when I say biotech, I'm being selfish, agree, because investors and getting investments in this sector is much more challenging than the IT. And forget about unicorns. Just forget right now about unicorn. It'd be great if we can repeat the Silicon Valley, this thing. But I think when we are voicing it in your minutes, I think one important part is how do we gear the regulatory ecosystem, the type of funding which comes from government for, TRL 7 post-7 type of entrepreneurs, innovations, and helping them overcome the regulatory, things. Yes, we should be a little, having said that, every startup has a lot of wish list. It's difficult to look at all individually the wish list, but definitely I think this is a learning we need to understand. When we sit in that evaluation of the committees, we have to think, because this is something we are facing in agri also. We have had now, policy makers because in most of the innovations in agriculture are part of government scheme. So when you are saying this works, they say, can you certify and say this will work, and so many farmers will be impacted. It's difficult for any incubator to do that. So these are issues which will now start coming. I think we have reached a maturity in our system, and that maturity should be taken. If we have to, I'm not using leapfrog, I'm saying pole vault. We need to probably address at least these three. Creating human resources, having a better, more mature ecosystem for regulatory activities to be taken up in the entrepreneur, and then having a more impactful incubator ecosystem. For that, you also need to have staff who are trained and who know about innovation pathways. That's important. With this, I think I thank again everybody, the audience, the participants, and best wishes from all three of us to all the budding entrepreneurs in their journey. Look forward to seeing you next year in a different role as they. Thank you.
So before we conclude the session, since Professor Bhat is also an entrepreneur, I would like few tips and points from him how he, in his role as a faculty and entrepreneur, managed the things, and how any other, because there are quite a few faculties also over here. So if there is anything from your side.
Well, no, I don't have a presentation.
Just few.
Yeah. So, for example, this is something that we translated and commercialized through this startup. Is a point-of-care devices which we call Lab on Palm. So when this was actually researched through 2 generations of PhD students in my group, and we were very conscious to file patents because that was very important. And when we were sitting on all this intellectual property, we thought we should really translate it. And fortunately, my PhD student who was just graduating, he was also very keen. But his condition was that only if you come along with me, I will take this forward. So then I decided to take a sabbatical leave. Again, talking about the ecosystem, at that time, IISc did not have a policy to give sabbatical leave for entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Right, so, you could take sabbatical leave to work in a company, but you can't start a company without getting paid for yourself, because as a startup, you don't have money to pay yourself, right? But these are the things that you can nudge the system, right? So I was able to convince that this is worth considering for sabbatical leave, and now it has become a policy at the institute. So I took a year off, got the product made, and then came back and continued as a faculty. But as I said, institute gives me 1 day in a week to work on the company. So I continue to very closely engage with the startup. But we have a team of people who are actually warriors, pushing things on the ground. But yeah, it's an interesting journey, yeah.
I think the success in IIT is also, if you really look at our national picture, many of the IIT Chennai is one example, but many IITs, including Delhi IIT, they have this provision and this system in place already. Your institute is new, so probably they need to do that. So it's a learning, and we should take note of this in our proceedings. This is very important. Pushing the faculty, giving them that freedom, that autonomy, nurturing them into filing patents. I think IKP Prime should know the difficulty how we are facing getting scientists to come into this. Because all of a sudden then writing a paper is much easier and publishing it is much faster than writing and filing a patent and understanding the whole dynamics of it. So Yeah, I think early stage acquaintance is probably the only answer.
Yeah, you said there are faculty here, but see what happens is that faculty oftentimes say that, oh, the rules are not there. But institute is all of us, it's we who make the rules. Unless you keep nudging the system will not change. Right? That's very, very important,
So I would like to add what Dr. Bhat said. I think I totally agree because it's a misconception that we are disablers. Actually, we are enablers. Institutes, they are radically conservative, as scientists are. We are radically conservative. So that radical part has to come from the drive of the person who is taking the initiative. Of course, I cannot blame my student who was fantastic, didn't take up because I didn't have the funds, and that's a practical ground reality. If that person gets a postdoc in a very premier place, of course, that's what matters. And I think the institutions are indeed, as Madam said, our institution is a new institution, but it has been fantastic. I mean, it would be wrong to say the support, the invisibly visible support that we have been getting. And it's our duty, because basically we are having the India that has been inherited to us by our previous generations, right? So what are we going to inherit? And it is, as Dr. Bhat was saying, if we want to change the system, I think basically we have to take risks. And it is not that risky at the end of the day if you look at it. Some screws, some systems, sometimes no policy is a good policy, then being pragmatic and coming up with things. So I am very optimistic about the modern Indian scenario, seeing the younger people, because they are coming up, they are the drivers. And I have had the privilege of working with really bright kids, and some of them are sitting behind my friends, who pushed it just without having to think about the nature of it. So that foolishness, that kind of drive, and a little bit of being open to risk and being able to father failures. We had lots of failures, and I don't know if we are going to succeed. We may also fail at the end of the day. And as Dr. Madhusudhana was asking, what is the vision? The vision is, for instance, Bengal, Calcutta is becoming a center of geriatrics, okay? All the houses, if you see, we don't have young people. It's very less. So my brother, he is settled in Germany in a very high level position. He cannot even come back because even if he wants, he does not have an equivalent position. So my dream or our dream is to create a wealth knowledge ecosystem where we burn the knowledge to create wealth and then burn wealth to create knowledge. So this ecosystem, it's inspired by Dr. Mashalkar's sentence, right? So he's talking of pole vaulting. So this ecosystem, we are trying to do it in a very, very microscopic way by bringing one result at a time. So I am graduating. If you ask me, I'm a graduate student now. But the graduate student, I'm learning the hard way from failures. So, and it is hard. It's not easy. I work extremely hard now. I have very less hours of sleep. I have ailing parents to take care of, and I am thankful to my wife, my parents, and to my son for being there, and to the friends who are there, and of course the enablers. So as you said, there is no easy way. It's not easy. Entrepreneurship is much harder than becoming a professor, I think. So only if you have some bugs in your brain, you want to create something, then you go for it. And you have to have the passion, the feel of creating value. Thank you.
The fact that all of you are there, that means you had that drive.
So Professor
no, I just,
from University of Hyderabad.
so no question, but I just want to say something about the university. Actually, Dr. Bhat was telling that, the leadership in any institution is very important, because I wanted to tell you that university systems having incubation is, very tough. But we could do, in our university, because of our leadership, previous Vice Chancellor, Professor Appoorva. So you could convince most of the faculties. Now, as you said, now faculty, we can take a sabbatical. So the leadership is very important for the institution. Let's say as a person, if I go approach, you have to write many, many letters, and they may not give. But the leader is very important. The second thing, I wanted to tell you one thing, maybe, the policy makers, as academician, we can do that. At undergrad level, we should teach entrepreneurship. That is very important. And most of the Western countries, the teaching is a very minimal. I mean, they study maybe only 30%, and the 70% is more of research and other things. That is very important. We are lacking behind that one. In all academics, maybe a little bit in IITs, but basic institutions, that is very important for, to bring more, young entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Madam, one thing, here we are talking about institute being not attached to any government institute, being a private practicing doctor, and there might be another engineers who are privately working. For them to become a scientist to entrepreneur, it's a completely different task. There is no organization to support you. There is no sabbatical leave. It's your burning desire which can push you, and you get support from your inner will and your only wife, I think.
Yes, sir, one second.
Yeah, can I? I am from IISc, Kolkata. I have been in the administration for quite some time. So let me just defend the administration because my colleague Somajit Roy. See, main point is that first of all, none of us knew any of these rules about startup. And we learned as we progressed. I am from Odisha, he is from Bengal, and the mindset was not there. It's quite amazing. After the startup thing came, all of us learned. And for example, regarding solar, we put it up in our BOG, ministry objects, then compromise, noted. So I can see that next level, if product becomes successful, how to share with the institute is a big problem. We are learning from IISc, learning from IIT Kanpur, but IIT Kanpur is also no better. My wife has a startup there. Same problem when you take it from one level to next level. Institutions have a big role to play, and how to do it is not very easy. So we are also struggling. I'm listening to all the problems.
You have the TTO of IKP there. They will be there to help you. So the function of TTO is for that only. So I think.
Yes, ma'am.
Manish. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. When the discussion is this stimulating, we don't feel hunger, but it's time, so I have to stop everybody now. Thank you to the chair and co-chairs for moderating this session. It has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you to all the discussion participants, all the scientists, entrepreneurs. They shared their thoughts, their journey with us. We have taken note of it. And very much thank you to all the audience who have taken active participation and asked all the questions. So on behalf of IKP Prime team, I thank you everybody, and let's now break for lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Why IKP Prime?
Sorry?
Why IKP Prime?
Yes.
Sorry, excuse me.